Hello and welcome to Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected, where we share inspiring stories on a wide range of cultural and social issues worldwide. We also feature exclusive interviews and have creative contemporaries who are shaping culture in art, music, and fashion join us. So stay tuned because you never know who we'll have on the show. We also feature exclusive interviews and have creative contemporaries who are shaping culture in art, music, business, fashion, and even the food industry join us. So stay tuned because you never know who we'll have on the show. I'm the host and creator, Folasade Ologundudu, and thanks for listening. This first season, we're highlighting artists, curators, and art professionals from across the globe as we explore the African diaspora. We're also joined by the allies and supporters who seek to empower creatives of color throughout the world. We speak on issues of identity, love, spirituality, heritage, craft, and what it means to be a Black artist today, and all of the things that come with being a creative professional in the art industry. We share thoughts on life, work, business, and current events. No idea is too mundane, and no topic is off limits. Each episode, like each guest, is truly unique. Join us as we continue the journey of sharing empowering and inspiring stories. Let's go! This week, I am joined by Lucia Hierro, the Dominican-American artist whose work explores issues of cultural identity, consumerism, and class. I discovered some of the interesting things about her childhood, growing up with a dark-skinned Dominican father and a very light-skinned and fair-haired Dominican mother, and experiencing issues of race, colorism, and racism growing up in New York City's Washington Heights. From her time at Yale pursuing her MFA to the things that she feels are most important in art making, we covered a lot in 30 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode with Lucia Hierro. New York is such a special place that's captivated the hearts and minds of millions of people across the globe. Can you describe what it was like growing up here?
New York is so wild because everyone's just up and about like 24/7. So there was always something happening. I grew up on Dyckman, and so that neighborhood is a predominantly Dominican neighborhood, like historically. And growing up around there felt like most of those folks that live there had never left DR. They just created a little DR in New York.
Did you experience that also outside of the home when you were growing up?
My home life was richer because my father's a musician. My mother has a beautiful singing voice. And both of my brothers went on to be musicians as well. And so it was this crazy like Partridge Family, Dominican Partridge Family. Everyone would grab an instrument. Something would be happening. We had a recording studio next door to our apartment, and so Dad would have people coming over and staying with us all the time. And the idea of like having to go to school and then be like a normal kid to me then was like, oh, I don't like this. This is not. But I'd bring my friends into the whole thing. Like, oh, come over. You should see what's going on in this house.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How does your heritage and culture as a Dominican woman influence your perspective and your approach to art?
Wherever you're from is definitely like a particular like filter. And so because I lived in the Dominican Republic for a little bit and then lived in Inwood, it was sort of this back and forth. I was able to see why, like the why of the culture in New York. I don't know if that makes sense.
Of course.
But that definitely shaped the way that I was seeing the way that New York functioned even. Mm-hmm. and the way that then America was something separate from me or something, even because I had seen sort of the effects or the way people spoke about America in the Dominican Republic.
Right.
And so then how I'm then looking at making art is always through a sort of translation or filter so it definitely affects that.
How long did you spend in the Dominican Republic?
I was there 3 years. I was always going there to visit my grandmother and family, but 3 years consecutively, 8th through 10th grade. Yeah. Wow, those are really important years. Mm-hmm. Very formative. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like for you? And then also coming back to the U.S. That was hard. Because I remember the conversation. That conversation being, Dad is exhausted right now. Yeah. And I didn't have the language or was aware, or the awareness of what my father was dealing with as a Black Dominican man in New York. He was exhausted on many levels, and so when my mom said that, it's almost like dad couldn't even get those words out, so she had to say it. And so I knew that I had to be a good sport about it, but I did not, that the idea of having to speak Spanish 24/7 in school was going to be a thing. The writing, the reading, the new system of things, and that was a whole, that was eye-opening on a different level, because I think dad also wanted us to see how privileged we were here.
Right.
So that sort of political awareness started really young, because and that was by design. Dad was like, I need you guys to see this.
You talked about your dad identifying as a Black Dominican male in America, and there's so much colorism throughout communities of color within the Latinx community. I would say there is a lot of that, and you happen to be very light-skinned. How do you think your dad was affected by being a Black male and a Black Dominican male in America?
I remember being a child when a lot of the big news stories were like Amadou Diallo and things like that dad definitely would talk to us and be like, I go through a lot of things walking out that door
that you have no idea about.
Have no idea, because he is more dark skinned. My mom's very light skinned and blonde, and she was a nanny in a gated community of Washington Heights, and even there I think she started realizing like, oh, I'm treated differently than the Jamaican nannies or the whatever, and that awareness where she was like, oh, here I was struggling with language and all these other things, but here's this other layer. But I don't think she realized what my dad was going through, and I think it was very difficult for my father to have that conversation, because he also didn't have the language to sort of speak about it. And that's the thing with the Caribbean itself, that, again, to use a phrase, by design we didn't have a sort of Black is beautiful movement after we had a dictatorship,
right,
which had a huge impact on the way that we perceived ourselves,
right.
And so that was a thing where it's like, yeah, if you don't have a language to speak to those things, and how are you supposed to heal and move? And so dad was always very hyper aware and was like, this is my experience. And also the language barrier, because dad spoke less English than my mom. So any police altercation or whatever was heightened by my dad, like, not being able to respond properly.
Right. Or that inability to communicate.
Yeah. And then being seen as maybe uncooperative for not speaking. So those experiences definitely affected him.
I remember the first time that my mom sat me down and talked to me about racism. And she told me a story once of when we took a drive to a plant nursery in Bay Ridge, and a woman, and I, as a brown-skinned young girl, as a baby, there was a white family nearby. And, she's like, Sade, I remember the first time someone called you a nigger in front of me when you were a little girl and didn't even know. And what she was saying is like, these are my experiences. These are things that I have lived through and gone through that at this age in your life you don't know anything about yet. You're still too young to have experienced them, just too young to understand the magnitude of what has happened around you. So there's so many different experiences that people of color have throughout the world. I think the Caribbean is a very, very fascinating and specific area where so much has happened. You see a lot of people that come from countries where they have tons of pride, and you see others that are completely warped by the view of white supremacy and white superiority. I wanted to talk a little bit now about your work and move on to the next question. Your work has deep political, economic, and social implications. It is vast and far-reaching on many levels. How or why, if at all, did your upbringing influence you to pursue this kind of work?
I'd say that I got into art via music.
Beautiful.
That's the way that I was introduced to the arts. I thought that there was maybe something a little bit wrong with me, because I wasn't one of the I didn't play an instrument or do anything like that. I was like, God, everybody does this in this family. My father made merengue, which is the traditional music of the Dominican Republic. But when he was a young man, his interests were in rock.
Wow.
And he wanted to do a fusion of sort of Latin rock with Afrobeats. In a sense, he had a duty as a musician from the Dominican Republic to introduce merengue to wider audiences. When I got to undergrad and was studying all these different art historical movements, I realized that I really wanted to learn more about Dominican artists. I wasn't being taught that. I didn't see it anywhere. And Caribbean artists in general. I was very fascinated with the Caribbean and wanted to learn more.
What was it like for you being a woman of color studying at Yale? That's traditionally been a place dominated by white and particularly by male students and faculty where you received your MFA.
There were a lot of female faculty, like teaching, actually. That's the interesting part about the disparity between academia and then the real world, right, like art world, right? In quotations. That there's a huge disparity with the representation you see outside of the academic space. So in academia, you do have a lot of female professors and colleagues, but in a culture of trying to fit in, getting to a class already as an artist and as a woman, especially the philosophy class at Yale, was really interesting because you'd walk in and it was all men, and I'd walk in, I had really long hair at that time, so I had really long curls, and I'd just be sashaying in there with my curls, like, hey, I'm in my philosophy class. I was so happy. I was like really happy to be in. I don't know. There was something about I'm really into libraries, and like I love being surrounded by like people learning, and there's something about that I find romantic, and so I was really excited. Yeah, I was really excited about it, and then quickly realized like, oh God, every time I'd raise my hand, I was looked over, or if I did say something, you had that mansplaining situation where somebody would come in and either say exactly what you said or try to one up you using doublespeak, and I'd go, well, that's exactly what I said. You just added fancier words to that. And having to always, stand my ground and be harder and tougher and louder, but then walking a balance of not being perceived as a sassy Latina. Then I'm in critiques or something and witnessing my black female colleagues couldn't get a word in without somebody being like, you're angry, or you calm down, or this, and I was like, oh my fuck, like what is.
Just you saying that is infuriating.
Yeah.
Right? No, I'm not angry. I'm angry now.
Yeah, now.
I wasn't angry 3 seconds ago before you said it.
Of course. And so that was a thing that then, even me standing up for, let's say that in that situation going, I think they're being completely reasonable. But there were the moments where I was hyper aware of the fact that I have that ambiguous, I'm the ambiguous ethnicity in the Gap commercial that people sort of were like, I don't know if she is, so yeah, sure, whatever.
She's fine.
Yeah, she's fine. Or let's overlook it because we don't know how to talk about it. And it's either one of those two. And then I found...
both are incredibly insulting.
Both are incredibly insulting, but both hold power too. I realized that I was able to then, in certain spaces, go, reference certain thinkers or whatever, where people weren't talking about, black philosophers or black artists or Caribbean artists or whatever, to then be able to speak up and do that work. There's a moment of being in the program where you notice that if there is a male conceptual artist, that he can think all week and print one thing out on a piece of paper, and you could be doing the same and producing a similar result, and that you were seen as lazy, as opposed to you were doing the thing that it takes to be a conceptual artist. And so that, to me, that's where I really wanted to double down and call myself that, because I was like, wait, you're not giving us the or you have to be extreme in order to be called that. You have to be Adrian Piper with like a PhD and every, to do that.
As a woman, or as a woman of color, or both?
Both, yeah.
Right. What kind of pressure is that to put on a student?
Immense. It is, and especially because you're not doing the work to know that there is an entire country filled with artists and thinkers, right? Like, I think we tend to forget when we're here. We adopt a very American imperialist attitude when we think about that. Like, we want to do the work for Dominican scholars and for people doing work on Afro descendancy and whatever, like that. The people are out there doing that work, but we really get on our high horse over here and they're like, we got to help them. They don't know themselves. They don't, and that's incredibly insulting to people doing so much work out there.
And it's also very dangerous.
Yeah,
right. You spoke a little bit earlier about sort of having to like step up and speak to the fact that you are a Dominican woman and that's your identity. That was my takeaway. Did you have to talk to your professors and people in class about wanting more education and more knowledge about Dominican artists, Caribbean artists?
Yeah, that was definitely a conversation. I was glad that I had the group of faculty members that were there at the time, because I had Nicola Y and Wilvia Longo, who both have ties to the Caribbean and knowledge of other Caribbean artists. So they were very helpful in terms of going, hey, this is a class you should be taking. Mm-hmm. Here's Kobina Mercer. Here's Erica James. And then they brought in Kelly Jones, and Kelly Jones taught a class on Caribbean history. And if people don't know who Kelly Jones is, I would suggest looking her up, because she's a Mary Baraka's daughter.
I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, because he went by Leroy Jones before. So yeah, she was also instrumental in me learning more about Caribbean artists, and also the threads.
All those little connections.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think has been your biggest takeaway from your time at Yale, and what part of your formal education most influences the way you create and approach art today?
The biggest takeaway, I think, was about how to build community around what you do or what you love to do. When I got to this studio space, to then meet Dario and go, let me not close the door. Dario is a part of this, and we are going to speak about art together. And that led to so many things, including Larry and all that. Yeah.
And in terms of the way you create art, what do you think has been your biggest takeaway?
I'd say research, the research behind the work, and the steps to making, I think, was a thing. I think that was something that I learned that in undergrad, but that was definitely a place where I watched, especially from artists that visited and were talking to us, that when there's a lot of heft, ingredients, you're gonna make a better soup. And so that's the
100%.
Yeah, it's not gonna be thin.
No.
And so that's where
it's layered.
Mm-hmm. And I realized, no, this is way too complex for me to give people a one-liner. I wanted the really nuanced stuff, that the slow burn. And you get that from a lot of research. I think that was one of the biggest things about making the work, but also that we're living in a time in which I've actually been thinking about this a lot and questioning it. So don't take me at like too much of this, but
sure.
That the sort of function of art, the purpose of it. And while I was there, I think that seeing the rest of the school, seeing who were the future leaders, right? Seeing who, because that's a school that makes presidents, and
right.
And so thinking about that and going, okay, so I have a lot of work to do to answer to that, and how does one communicate that to that public, but also my the people that are following me and looking up to that work or whatever. And so that became like, okay, so how do you make work that is both fun to make but also addresses certain things? And that was honestly the biggest takeaway from Yale, was going, okay, there's a lot of work to do.
Why did you become an artist? Did art choose you, or did you choose art?
I'd say art chose me. You do a little bit of both. First, I think it chose me. It was just a way of expression that was literally in my DNA, in my family. The way that we expressed ourselves was via art. And my senior year of high school, I went to Cooper Union for the Saturday program for high school students. And I stepped into the first artist studio I'd ever stepped into ever. And that was Miguel Luciano, who's so wonderful. He was cool. He was talking about Puerto Rico. He was talking about the politics in Puerto Rico. And he was young and he was doing it and he had his face. And I was like, oh, wait.
People touch you in ways that you don't even realize they will. A consistent theme in your work focuses on consumerism. Can you share more on these ideas and why it's been an important part of your current work thus far?
The answer to that, I feel, is tied to the choosing to be an artist. I really don't ever want to do something that puts me in that hamster wheel of working in order to make money to plan for my death. That's like ultimately what
wow.
Ultimately, when you look at the way capitalism works, it's really what we're doing. We're like, okay, now we put money away for retirement, and then we put money away so that other people don't have to pay for my coffin and my thing and that is that's to me is like so wild. And at a certain point when I was making art, I was like, how can you make art when that concept is a thing? Like, how can you not make art about that thing? Like that thing is around us all the time. Like everything is commodified. Like every spirituality is commodified. Because if it's one thing that I realized growing up was that communities of color talk about money
all the time.
To enter white homes specifically, where that wasn't the case, was really like, what? Like, you think that's weird to talk about them? It's like, yeah, no, we don't. It was something that I carried in all the work that I made. The fact that I was in college and had to count my dollars and cents in order to make a project for a class. So then that started becoming a part of the thing.
Right.
Like my senior thesis, everything was done. I couldn't afford the canvases and the stuff. And so I decided, no, so then what do you do when you can't afford the thing? And I started getting masonite boards because they were impressively large. They come in 8 foot by 4.5 foot sheets. And so I thought, oh, let me work on that material, because that material is used to partition off really cheap little homes in the Caribbean and that sort of. So like out of necessity came using those objects and that sort of thing.
Interesting that ties back to the Caribbean. I wonder if that was intentional, knowingly or unknowingly.
In undergrad, yeah, that was intentional at that time. And those and that work was the work that I applied to Yale with. And I knew once I got there that I didn't want to continue painting. It was a choice that I made because I was like, the consumerism as a subject matter, I think, was always going to have to be in there.
May I ask what it's been like for you to be a woman in the art world, so often dominated by men, and what unique perspective you bring to your work because you are a woman?
It's been tough, like the pricing of work, the having to girl down is a term that
it's used in the industry.
Is used in the industry, yeah, girling down prices. I don't know what that mentality is, but whatever it is, our prices are lower. And so that, like, all of those things definitely affect you emotionally, mentally. You wonder, why do I do this? But like I said, it's changing, and I have a support system of female artists.
This is a question I'd like to close with. I read a quote of yours recently where you said, "It's more important than ever under the current political circumstances that we uphold intellect." Can you share a little on what that means to you and how we as a collective society can uphold a level of intellect in our approach to the world around us and ourselves?
I think I told you previously, I was like, when did I say that?
Found it.
Fake news. No. So I think mostly about how late capitalism has affected objective thinking, and we're seeing it. I have heard an experience from everybody that I know with a family member that is listening to every conspiracy theory online and every, and it's like, oh my God, I'm struggling with this person because they just won't listen to a fact because a fact is now in question. And that's a scary thing, and it's a scary thing when that seeps into the art world.
Absolutely.
And so that's a thing that I've been wanting to talk about with students when I visit universities or talk to students. Universities now, it's online, right? About the research and all of that behind the work. And you don't have to be in a university. I actually want to clear that up too, because it's like that work, you should want to do that work even when you're not in that setting.
Right.
Is to know about the thing that you're doing, that you're dedicating yourself to.
Right.
And the history of so many people that did it before you. And so even that is a little bit lost. There's less of, I would talk to certain people and go, God, you know so much art history. And it's like, yeah, you should want to do, you should want to do this. And and you can. It's work, but it's actually easier now with all the resources that we do have to do that work, to find out who Kelly Jones was reading about, and then find that person, and then find that person, and find that person, and reach out to these people. It's so much easier to send a DM now to somebody and they'll respond. And so, when I talk about sort of objectivity, I'm saying, like, there are some things that just are that thing, and it's it really is important for us to make sure that we're not silencing because of the ways in which this big, Instagram monster, social media, all of this stuff, all the glitz and that stuff, that does not get in the way of people that are doing that work. There are people doing so much work that may not have time to think about cute outfits, to show up in a million photos for events at the Whitney or wherever, right? But these people are actually oh my God, they're there going, you guys want to know about the diaspora? Here's the thing. And they're doing that work, but they're not being listened to because we want to see some type of thing. And we all feed into that beast in some shape or form. And so I definitely feel that that's what I mean by that too. It's like, let's not overlook these people that are doing that. Let's help them. Let's not call them nerds. Let's not call them like elitists. Let's not call them, because they're not just doing it just to sound great at a party. They're doing it so that we can like better understand ourselves and get along better.
And to preserve culture and heritage and keep tradition alive, and to have people understand where they are, where they came from, and where they're going.
Yeah, and a sense of holding people accountable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that's the thing that I've had to. That's one of the things that I've had to be very conscious of, is knowing that that there's the side of me, right? That it's the Spaniards and all that side. That there's a level of atonement there that I have to like sort of answer to, and then there's the side of me where it's the side that should be celebrated and talked about and put at the forefront there historically. And so those are two different jobs all tied together that I have to do.
But all stem from this like single root of like starting with making more intellectual decisions and being better informed. And also respecting, as you said, I think it's a great point, respecting the people who are out there doing the work. You know, it's just that simple.
Yeah.
Well, I think that this is it, and we've covered everything. And I just want to say thank you for joining me, and I'm really glad that we got to connect and meet. And also, if there's anything you'd like to say or finish with.
Oh, thank you so much. I think just gratitude. Thank you for reaching out to me for this.
Absolutely.
It's been wonderful.
It's been really great to chat with you.
Yeah.
That's our episode with Lucia Hierro. Be sure to check out our next episode as we round out the season and finish off 2020 strong, featuring the work of Black women in the arts and entering the new year, continuing this journey. If you haven't already, please feel free to share, like, and subscribe. And also, tell us what you like about the podcast. Tell us what you think about it and leave us a review. Reviews really help us get the word out and help to continue to do this meaningful work. And it really helps people learn about the podcast and know what we're doing here at Lightwork as we talk about art and life with these incredible artists and professionals. Well, there you have it, folks. It's a wrap. Check us out on our next episode as we continue to connect with artists, curators, and art professionals of color in our exploration of the African diaspora, including the allies who work to support and empower these artists and professionals through their dedication in the field. As always, stay motivated, stay inspired, and stay up. Peace and love, y'all. We out. I'm your host, Folasade Ologundudu, and catch us on our next episode. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected. Conversations on culture and current events with some of today's most exciting creative contemporaries.